Hey, welcome back to Sports Report Weekly. This week, myself and Bryce will be talking playoffs.
Hello, folks.
Yeah, we've got hockey and basketball, the professional leagues, and I'll let Bryce lead the way here.
So, give me your blessing, sir. What shall we dive into first?
We briefly discussed this a moment ago, but I already forgot, so I'm going to just say hockey, and we'll do that.
Marvelous. So we're going to go ahead and dive into the NHL playoffs. You have the 1, 2, and 3 seeds being as follows: the Anaheim Ducks, San Jose Sharks, Colorado Avalanche as follows. Unfortunately, the St. Louis Blues have dropped down as of thanks to their recent play. We'll get to that. But the playoff matchups here in the first round are as follows. You have the Colorado Avalanche taking on the Minnesota Wild. The St. Louis Blues facing off against conference and bitter rival, the Chicago Blackhawks.
That's scary.
The Anaheim Ducks, who finished first in the Western Conference, against the Dallas Stars, whom I could say I don't like because the Coyotes didn't get in, but that's a whole other story. And then the San Jose Sharks and the Los Angeles Kings. That rounds out the Western Conference. You move yourself over to the Eastern Conference. You have the Boston Bruins against the Detroit Red Wings, making their 23rd straight playoff appearance in the NHL.
They're creeping up on St. Louis's record.
They're going to go ahead and lose, but at the same time, you have to give credit to the franchise for what they're able to do, no matter how much you may or may not hate them. Also, Tampa Bay Lightning will host the Montreal Canadiens. The Pittsburgh Penguins will host the Columbus Blue Jackets, who have made the playoffs here, which is very congratulatory compared to where their franchise used to be the last 2 or 3 years in Columbus. And
nice
then you also have the New York Rangers and the Philadelphia Flyers. So we'll go ahead and start in the Western Conference. Again, Colorado Avalanche versus the Minnesota Wild. Dode, anything particular you've got on this one for us?
Not a whole lot. I'm thinking Avalanche just based off of they've been a strong team throughout the year, obviously. And also, I go to Mizzou, and Stan Kroenke, he owns the Avalanche, and he went to Mizzou, so where do you go, Stan? Go Avs. That's what I got.
Not even remotely a poor assessment. But the big factor for me in this series is the fact that the Avalanche have a lot. The Avalanche have a lot of young talent. And if they can continue to perform in the playoffs the way they did throughout the regular season, for me, they win this game in win this series in 5 or 6 games, because they do have the talent level to match up against the Wild. That being said, the Avalanche goaltending has not quite been there consistently throughout the year. Neither has Minnesota, don't get me wrong, either way.
Yeah.
However, and as you see in a lot of playoff series in the NHL, on 2 teams that in theory can match up somewhat evenly, the team that has the goaltender that gets hot can win it. Again, as I initially mentioned, Colorado is better talent-wise, so I do think they're going to be able to pull this series off. But it could be interesting. I look for the Avalanche in 6.
All right, I can see that happening. What's the next game or next matchup?
The next matchup in the Western Conference, we'll go down the first round in the Western and Eastern Conferences today for you. We'll get to the second when those happen. Is the St. Louis Blues and the Chicago Blackhawks.
Not happy.
From Chicago Blackhawks fans' perception, it's we're awesome. I love us. We're awesome. I love myself. We're awesome. I love my Blackhawks. We're awesome. I don't know who the captain was before Jonathan Toews, but who cares? I love the Hawks. Give me another beer. From a St. Louis Blues perspective, it was, okay, let's analyze the year. Let's figure out what we were good at and where all of a
playing
sudden
before
we
April.
started struggling.
That's what they were good at, playing before April.
Yeah. 3 weeks ago, the question was, are the Blues going to win the Stanley Cup playoffs? 2 weeks ago, it was, are the Blues going to have home ice advantage throughout the playoffs? A week ago, it was, are the Blues going to win a game? Yesterday, it was, can the Blues score goals? So
all of those answers are no.
Yeah, the concerns for the franchise have gotten continually more intensive.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got, plenty of friends that are huge Blues nuts, and some of them are really pessimistic people, and they just see it as another year where the Blues just don't do it. And I want to argue against them, but I think this series, I want it to go the whole length just so the Blues have a chance at it. But, the Blues haven't won in, the last week and a half or 2 weeks. So,
well, here's the thing for me personally.
If they get it turned around, I think they can do it. But it's just,
right. I mean, you bring a very good point to the table, and as a Blues fan, but as a more, I don't know the right word, but as a more, in-depth, analytical individual within the situation, here's what I can kind of, give to the situation. The Blackhawks are injured just as much as the Blues are. Obviously, Vladimir Tarasenko had the surgery on his hand, so there are some issues with his health. But at the same time, the Blackhawks top line has just as much of an injury issue right now as the Blues do. And when you're in a funk and there are issues that you have as a team that you've been struggling with for a little while, and again, I'm just simply going off of track record within professional sports. If you have a problem and you've been running along a problem for a while, what's the best way to get you out of that problem, even though you're working hard, but just aren't getting breaks? And the answer to that is play against someone you truly hate. And the Blues truly hate the Chicago Blackhawks. So, I will say this. I'm not sure the Blues are going to get over their hump and get back to the promised land. But if there was a playoff scenario where they could move forward and move on to the promised land and get out of their slump, this is that scenario, simply because they've done well all season. They've hit a rough patch, but holy cannoli, they're facing the team that they hate more than
this is their moment
team
of
who
reckoning.
is also struggling with injuries. So
they have to do it, and that's I just think the Blues got to do it. They got to. I don't know how though. I mean, it's gonna be a tight series. I'll let if the Blues I think talent-wise they're better by a little bit, but with the injuries sort of even everything out, and I think if they can find a way to put some goals, at least in the general direction of the net, they'll be able to, or some shots, I guess, if the goals go in there. But if they get some shots at the general direction of the net, this, like you said, this is the rival. It's the rival where the other team has been highly successful.
It's the one team that could get them out of their funk.
Yeah, and this is Cubs Cardinals, but the other way around, and it's one of those things where I think they've got the team that's looking down on them, their big rival, but they're at the very least head-to-head even at this point, and so I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna say it goes to the last game. It's going to be an exciting matchup.
I've got Blues in 7 on this one.
Yeah. So I'm going to go Blues as well.
All right. Next up, we've got Anaheim and Dallas. It's really, really cute that the Stars are in the playoffs, simply because they, choked less than the Coyotes did, getting into that 8th and final spot.
That being said,
Anaheim has played consistent hockey all year long. This is probably the only playoff series where a sweep wouldn't surprise me. But simply for the sake of the Stars and their pride as hockey players, and just knowing that a sweep in hockey is more difficult on a 7-game level than any other sport, I'll give it to the Ducks in 5, but...
Yeah, I've got Anaheim in 5 as well. I just think, I'm right there with you. It's just a matter of a team that's doing really well versus a team that was sort of like, we got here, yay. But good for Dallas to do it. I guess they got in there, but I think Anaheim in 5. It's just a better team. Just simply flat out.
Hands down, top to bottom, Anaheim's a way better team.
Yeah.
And then it leads us to the San Jose Sharks and Los Angeles Kings.
NorCal versus SoCal, San Francisco, LA. I love it. San Jose, but I mean,
it's the team I hate second most in the NHL versus the team I hate third most in the NHL.
And those. How does that?
Kings number 2, second most hate.
Oh, okay.
Sharks third most hate. Blackhawks are number 1. But
I feel you. I feel you on the Blackhawks, but yeah.
Yeah. But it's funny because the Kings this season don't scare me necessarily as much as the Kings of old. However, the Sharks are still the Sharks, and they have been as successful in the playoffs as a mute person has been in a spelling bee.
Yeah,
So,
the Sharks beat one team in the playoffs. That team is the St. Louis Blues, so luckily for the Blues, they're not playing them.
Well, and that was 3 years ago, before the Blues had won a playoff series in 10 years.
It had been a couple of times where it had happened, just previously, historically speaking. That's why I bring it up from time to time. But yeah, most recently it was a couple years ago.
Again, out of the 8 teams that are in the playoffs, if I had to pick the least likely to win the Western Conference, it would be the Sharks, even though they're as high of a seed as they are. Again, it's like a mute person trying to win the spelling bee, the Sharks, because they just simply don't do well in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's I want to almost say 5 games. I'm going to say 6 games.
I've got the Kings in 6. I'll give the Sharks a game or 2 games out of 2 out of 4 at home or 2 out of 3 at home, and give the Kings a couple on the road. But I've got the Kings in 6 here,
Yeah.
winning the series at home. Moving
Completely.
over to the Eastern Conference, we've got Boston, Detroit. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Detroit 23 straight seasons in the NHL playoffs. This obviously, now that they've moved on to the Eastern Conference, thanks to the whole kind of reseeding, realignment. Love the fact that you have a Boston-Detroit playoff series. I mean, this is so good for the core of hockey.
Oh yeah,
When
gets
you're
back to
talking about original franchises and that
the original 6,
deep-rooted
man.
love of the sport.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see. I mean, it was sad-ish to see them go from the West, but it's cool to see this sort of aspect of what's come from the whole realignment of the league. That being said, Boston, just a tremendous team this year, as they have been the past few seasons. I don't see them letting up on Detroit, who sort of just got in, so to say.
Well, and you know what? This is such an interesting series for me, just simply because, like you said, rivalries with the Blackhawks, rivalries with the Blues, rivalries with the Canucks. I mean, those are things that the Red Wings were all about in the Western Conference. Now that they're in the Eastern Conference, I mean, they really don't have a lot of whole rivalry. Not ambition, but they don't have a good established disagreement with a franchise. But if there's one franchise on that eastern side that they can really say, hey, look, we don't really like you, it's either New York or Boston.
Yeah, and I could see, especially if this series goes deep.
It's good to see this. But the thing is with these Detroit players, they've given a lot of opportunity to the young guys to come in and make their stamp on this new Detroit team. And so they're not the Red Wings of old necessarily, right? There are a lot of younger guys that are coming in and trying to prove a point. That being said, I think the Bruins are still definitely the better team here in this series. But the Red Wings have a lot of young guys with something to prove and nothing to lose, which is dangerous.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Which is very dangerous when you're a top-seeded team going to the playoffs. I do believe Boston will win this series, and as crazy as this sounds, I've got the Bruins in 7.
7, okay. I was thinking 6 just to make it interesting, but 7 would be really cool to see, just to try and build up a rivalry type thing for them. Because it is sad to see those old things of the past. Because I've never been the biggest hockey fan, but I grew up, middle school, high school age in Blues country, and just watching, Blues Red Wings was always one of those matchups. Always tuned in for, sort of mid-late '90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. You can go ahead and
that was somewhat more
quote
important
me
than
on this.
Blackhawks even.
Yeah. You can go ahead and quote me on this. This is your new Eastern Conference evil right here. Boston, Detroit. This is your new Eastern Conference bad blood.
Yeah.
Give it another 5. Give it another 5 years, and this will be one heck of a rivalry.
Yeah.
Moving on, we've got the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Montreal Canadiens. I've said it for the last few weeks now, and I will say it again. The Montreal Canadiens are my dark horse in the Eastern Conference. Anytime you have that high level of a goaltender in net for you, anything can happen. I've got them defeating the Lightning in this series in 6.
Yeah, it's all about the haves and the haves not, right? And so I'm going Canadiens as well. Tampa Bay minus Montana St. Louis. So I don't believe in Tampa Bay at all. Yeah, so I'm going to go with 6 as well. Montreal.
Moving on down, you've got Sid the Kid and the Pittsburgh Penguins facing the Columbus Blue Jackets. I love the fact that the Columbus Blue Jackets have made the playoffs. You have a good core young team. They've got good years ahead of them. I was honestly slightly sad to see them go out of that Central Division because the Blues and the Blue Jackets played a lot of really, really great games together. Whether they were truly equally talented or not, it was still a fun game to watch, quite frankly. However, you look at the Blues' history. Okay, who was the Blues GM that really built them up and made them the franchise they are today? And where is he now? Oh, that's right. He's in Columbus, making a great franchise in the Eastern Conference. So it, at the same time, is nice to see the fact that he's not in the West tormenting us. And he gets to be somebody else's problem. So, love to see them succeed and make the playoffs out East.
That being
Obviously,
said,
though, too much talent in Pittsburgh. I've got the Penguins in 5.
yeah, I also agree with that as well. They're just, the Penguins, great team. Just a piece or two away from being one of the best in the league. Crosby's Crosby. Pretty crazy stuff there. So, I agree with you.
Moving on down, you've got New York and Philly. 2 great franchises, 2 teams that, again, don't like each other. Makes for a great playoff series. But for me in this matchup, you could say, okay, you've got Martin St. Louis now in New York, and you've got a goal scorer there, and that's great. But you have to look, again, it's playoff hockey. Goals sell tickets. Defense wins championships. You have to look at the goaltending. And again, who has Philly had as a goaltender the last few years that's any good? If you can name one, good for you. But
I cannot.
You can't.
No.
Henrik Lundqvist, as inconsistent as he has been this year, he's the difference for me simply because he does have the ability to go the next level. I've got the Rangers on this one in 5.
Yeah, I feel you on the same way with Lundqvist. That's just who I was thinking of in this matchup was Lundqvist. Even with, the goal scorer, like I said, St. Louis being there, which I think that helps. But it's just that's something that's been lacking in Philly is they haven't had, that goalie. I don't know, hockey above any other sport, I think the defense wins championship moniker just reigns true. It's always, every year, it's a great, all of a sudden a goalie has just shut down everyone. Maybe they don't win the championship, but they at least make it through their conference or something like that. You saw that with Vancouver a few years ago, and you had Jonathan Quick a couple years ago, where just almost out of nowhere just shut everyone down. I just don't see that happen with Philly. I'm excited to see where Philly goes. I know through the draft they picked up this a young kid out of Union College who just won the Frozen Four. They've got offense coming and going, and in the future.
And they have a very deep AHL team.
Yeah, but you got to get that goalie. You got to get someone to just lock it down. So, yeah, I'm going to go with the Rangers. I'm going to say it goes, it's close. 5 or 6.
The fact that you had Ilya Brizgailov, who was a potential, goalie of the year candidate in Phoenix 2 years ago, but you brought him to Philly and he didn't do crap for you and you had to get rid of him. I mean, what really could you have?
Yeah. I guess I'll go with 5. I'll go 5 Rangers.
Rangers in 5. Again, I think they'll win that one at home. So give me a Western Conference winner and an Eastern Conference winner, Doug.
No, if we ran through all of them, I guess we have.
You don't have to go through each individual match.
Yeah, yeah.
Give me a Western and an Eastern finalist.
Just a Western and Eastern.
Or Western and Eastern winner.
Okay, out of the East, I'm gonna go with Boston. I think they're just strong, which I guess that's sort of cliche to say Boston's strong, but I mean, They are
Year ago today.
just, crazy talented team, top to bottom, offense, defense. The West is tough because, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, 2 weeks ago, if you asked me this, I say Blues. And I think we talked about this previously on a previous episode. I was thinking like Blues are right there.
Yeah. No, you're right.
But now, I mean, Anaheim is that team that's just they're consistent, and so I'm going to go Anaheim just because of what things look like right now. That being said, I could even see all of a sudden LA, Kings or Blues, or the West just seems really. You got a bunch of teams there that could really
crazy.
That could show up, but I'm going to go with Anaheim.
All right. Well, I hate you for saying the same thing I was thinking.
It is what it is. I mean, it's just.
But yeah, no. Honestly, though, I will slightly stretch on a limb here. Boston has been the dominant force in the East all season long. But for me, and I don't know why this year it's telling me this, but there's something about a goalie that can shut down anyone, and a young offensive couple of lines that when hot can score goals better than anyone, that screams at me Stanley Cup contender. And because of that, I'm leaning towards the Montreal Canadiens.
All right. I mean, I'm not a huge Montreal fan, but
if I had
they have not been there in a hot minute.
If I had to think, truly logically, I would pick the Bruins to come out of the East. But there's something about that Habs team that says, don't sleep on us just yet. And
all right.
I will go ahead and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say the Montreal Canadiens make it out of the Eastern Conference. That being said, moving over to the West, Anaheim truly has been consistently the best team in the West, aside from the last 2 weeks with the Blues. Again, 3 weeks ago, if you said who's the best team in the Western Conference, I would have said there's the Blues, the Blues, the Blues, and the Blues. But then the last 3 weeks have happened, and you've said, where the hell have they gone? So you have to give favoritism to the Anaheim Ducks, but just as you have to respect the Habs in the East, it literally kills me to say this, but you have to respect the Kings. And you have to respect the Blackhawks simply because Corey Crawford has done enough with that franchise to win games. Obviously, the Blackhawks have some injuries with their top scorers, Taves, Gainer, all those guys missing out right now. But if the Blackhawks become healthy, they can score goals with any team in the league. And if Jonathan Quick in LA gets himself together, they've got San Jose, who's always been a pushover in the playoffs for the most part, and then an Anaheim team that they've kind of always had Anaheim's number. So you could see a Kings team in the Western Conference Finals against, quite frankly, 3 out of 4 different teams that have been struggling recently. So in the Western Conference, I'm gonna go ahead and be a homer. I'm gonna go ahead and be a homer and pick the Blues to come out of it.
All right, yeah, I can feel that.
But if it's not the Blues, it'll be the Ducks.
Yeah. Well, I guess that wraps up our talk and thoughts on
playoffs.
On the playoffs for the NHL, and we can quickly chat some NBA stuff, I guess.
Moving quickly and rapidly forward as I continue to lose traction on my phone here.
Yeah. So, do you have the NBA playoffs pulled up
Absolutely,
for you?
positively.
All right, great. And I guess we'll start out west again, or well, let's go east because east is just terrible, and then we can finish on the west
Yeah.
because
By the way,
the
the
East aren't bad.
Phoenix Suns won 47 games this year, and they are the
Right.
first of, I think, only like 3 or 4 teams to win 47 games and not make the playoffs. By the way,
Yeah.
that 47 win season would take them to third in the Eastern Conference.
I
So they
bet
don't make the playoffs in the West, but though that same record in the East gives them third place. Screw the
if the
Eastern
NBA
Conference. You suck. I hate you. Go to hell.
Yeah, if the NBA continues with this sort of Western Conference, regardless if the Heat win the NBA championship, but like Western Conference dominance throughout the regular season, I can't, the playoffs will just be a disappointment,
Meaningless, useless,
and
horrible,
they'll
worthless,
need
a giant
to
piece of shit. Yeah.
they'll need to
Screw
find a
you, NBA.
way to just pick, the top, four teams from each conference guaranteed to make it, and then the next eight best teams following that. Because I get that's obviously like an awkward thing, especially in America, where it's always just like you know, you have your conferences or your divisions or whatever, and then those top teams make
Yeah.
it.
And
But the
I
NBA
do
is
apologize.
bad.
I misspoke slightly here. I apologize. Phoenix's 47 wins would actually only put them fifth in the East.
Oh, okay.
Toronto and Chicago both finished with 48 wins. However, if they played in a conference with teams that had 15, 18, 23, and 25 wins as their bottom four, I'm pretty sure they'd have more than 47 on their schedule in the winning column.
Yeah, and I mean, there's still one game left for.
Well, everything's done.
Yeah, so I mean, in theory, they could finish effectively tied for third in the East.
Correct.
But either way, the idea is just that the East is
It's
terrible.
pathetic.
But so the first, I guess we're going to Heat, and who finally grabbed the eighth seed? Was that the should
We actually have number one in the East, the Indiana
Oh,
Pacers.
yeah, they're the Pacers. My bad, I forgot.
Versus the Atlanta Hawks. The 2-7 matchup sitting with Miami Charlotte. 3-6, well, depending again on the last game, we have Toronto, Washington, or potentially Chicago moving up and having a Chicago, Washington, or a Toronto, Brooklyn series.
All right, but we'll just go ahead as they are today, assuming the teams that win and the teams that lose, and things stay as they are. So we've got that Indiana, who, as I just said, I'd forgotten that they were even first in the East because they have been scoring
They'll be
just.
playing Indiana no matter what.
Yeah, or they'll be playing whom?
I beg your pardon.
Atlanta?
Atlanta.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've got Indiana winning this one. I think it's going to go. Oh, man, I think it'll either be like 5 and a very close one, or even 6. I think Indiana wins either way, but they've just been off since the All-Star break. They had a huge lead in the East and have been able to maintain that, especially with Miami losing some surprising games last
And
couple.
Atlanta's kind of awful.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Atlanta's one of those teams where like they're like a sort of pest. Like that's why I think they can win 2. I think Indiana in 6.
I mean, if you look at the regular season correlation between these two teams, I mean, it was a 2-2 tie between the two throughout the regular season. But for crying out loud, it's hard to pick a team that hasn't won more than 38 games to win a playoff series. Whether it's Miami or Indiana, the Hawks will lose this playoff series, and they will lose it at the bare minimum 4-1. I mean, you move to the other series, obviously, then there in the East. If it's Miami, Atlanta, again, 4-1 Miami. If it's Indiana, Atlanta, 4-1 to Indiana. So the other team will, no matter what, play against the Charlotte Bobcats, which is funny because Michael Jordan was a great basketball player. His franchise...
They made it to the playoffs, but it's the East, so it's like an asterisk type playoff thing. The Fighting Jordans.
At least they were over 500.
Yeah, they just don't stand a chance though in this matchup. I think Miami, they realize even the core of that team, even to like the 5th, 6th, 7th players, is still there. From winning championships in the past. So, I see them pulling things together, figuring it out, Spoelstra getting stuff working, and they've lost a couple of these games where I don't think they really were paying attention that much the past couple weeks. They don't want to get down against the Bobcats. I don't think anyone, until the Bobcats change their name back to the Hornets, I don't think anyone wants to lose to the Bobcats. There's just something about that team that just doesn't seem like it's in the NBA.
And I feel like the NBA has done a disservice taking the Hornets out of the NBA.
Well,
I felt like
it'll be back next year.
New Orleans needed to be the Hornets just because that's who they were.
Well, I like the color scheme New Orleans went with, but I like the Hornets as well, just because it was a cool 90s franchise sort of thing. Had this cool vibe.
You had Larry Johnson, you had Muggsy Bogues, you had baby blue and purple next to each other.
Yeah,
come on, with a hint of teal green. What
and
the heck else can you ask for?
And in New Orleans, they had Chris Paul, they had Tyson Chandler, they had some good seasons. But the Hornets name will be back next year. It's going to be in Charlotte. I'd be surprised if it's not, because New Orleans, because the way the league, when Tom Benson's bought the Hornets, and the name's out there, it's available.
The Pelicans, though. But
the
Pelicans, though.
Have you seen their mascot? It's going to make your kids cry. It's scary.
It is. That's my point, man.
But I like the look of the stuff on the jerseys, but their physical mascot is just creepy.
It's a bullshit excuse for how your child was born. That is New Orleans, which is probably what happens on 90% of the people that leave Mardi Gras. Is they see it as a BS excuse as to why they had a child because they had too much fun at Mardi Gras.
I think you give. The Pelicans' name isn't quite as striking as a lot of other teams, but I think they've got an okay look for their jerseys. Good look jerseys. The name,
the colors are good.
I don't know what they could have done. I wish the NBA, they wanted to go black and gold like the Saints. The NBA wouldn't let them do it. I thought that was kind of BS.
That actually would have been great, but they couldn't have been the Pelicans. They would have had to change the mascot to something different. But black and gold with that NBA franchise, they'd have been the only ones that were black and gold since back when the Washington Wizards had black jerseys with the gold and blue print. So
the Wizards have some crazy jerseys. But, okay, so we've got Charlotte. We've got Miami. I think Miami wins this one.
Yeah. Indiana and Miami will both breeze through their first round.
Yeah. But I think Miami wins 4. Man, I want to say 4-0. But I'm going to say
easily,
4-0.
Easily, no matter what. And this leaves us with, and as we go into the last game, Toronto and Chicago are both tied with 48 wins, with one game left to play in the Eastern Conference, going up against either Brooklyn or Washington. Here's the thing, Brooklyn The Brooklyn Nets have played some fantastic basketball since the All-Star break.
Yeah, they've been
And
good.
it's really difficult to go against what head coach Jason Kidd has done out
Where,
there.
where are the playoff brackets? What are they set up as right
Well,
now?
if the playoffs were today, you'd have Toronto, Washington, Chicago, Brooklyn.
Okay, so I'm going to go with Toronto, Washington. I think Toronto, I haven't heard anything about them because no one cares about them south of the border. Or at least
True.
ESPN doesn't care about them. Like, to think they're the third seed as of right now, and no one is talking about them. But Washington, they
Has
have
heard
the
even
opportunity
less.
to be talked about, and it's just not happening. So I'm going to go with Toronto in 6. It's,
And,
I
and
don't
here's
really don't know.
what's really, really fun. If Toronto and Washington do face off, I've got Toronto. If Chicago and Brooklyn face off, I've got Brooklyn.
Me too. That's it. Yeah, that's it. I got Brooklyn
Simply
in the first
because
round.
the Nets have been playing so well. But hold the phone. There's a very good likelihood that the Chicago Bulls will jump to the 3rd seed, play against the Charlotte Bobcats, and Toronto drops to the 4 seed and plays the Brooklyn Nets as the 5. And guess what? If that's the case, the Chicago Bulls will beat the Washington
Washington
Capitals.
Bullets.
I think Washington
Yeah.
Bullets. It's
The
growing up.
Washington
That's brand
Wizards. Capitals
new.
are hockey.
Washington Wizards.
Yeah. We filmed this late at night.
Point being, Chicago will beat Washington, but then you have a Toronto as a 4 and Brooklyn as a 5. Guess what? The Nets are going to win.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Nets win either way. Wizards lose either way. Yeah. That covers the East pretty easily.
Out of those, I mean, if you look at those 4 teams in the middle, Toronto, Chicago, Brooklyn, and Washington, I feel like Brooklyn and Chicago are the 2 best teams.
Yeah.
And unless they have to play each other, they'll both get through. Toronto and Washington are the 2 lesser teams. Charlotte being the worst out of the 4.
Yeah, with Washington being the worst of the
Therefore
4.
being,
Yeah,
the
definitely
odd
agree
man
with you
out.
on all
I think no matter who they play, Washington will lose. I think
yeah. If
no
all things
matter
stay
who
the
they
same,
play, I like Chicago. But
Yeah.
Brooklyn and Toronto are pretty equal. I put Brooklyn slightly ahead of Toronto. So anyway,
Yeah.
moving to the West.
Yeah. Sounds good.
San Antonio has been the dominant force in the Western Conference throughout the season. They're going to look to either play Dallas or Memphis. No matter who they end up getting, you'll have San Antonio in a maximum of 5 games.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm
going to look at it. I'm going to say
Yeah.
San Antonio, Memphis, and I'm going to say San Antonio wins 5 games.
Yeah.
Memphis, they can play some good in the playoffs, but I don't see it being as quite a dynamic series as it was a few years ago against Oklahoma.
Not even remotely. You got Oklahoma City then and Dallas. You've got an old Dirk Nowitzki. That being said, you've got an Oklahoma City team that, quite frankly, doesn't play team basketball. They're a team built for the regular season. They'll beat the Mavericks simply because, Dallas just can't match up.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a 6-game
It's not
series.
an Oklahoma City team that, to me, is not exceptional, but they'll get through this series. I've got Oklahoma City in 5. Then you've got a very interesting situation with the Los Angeles Clippers and the Golden State Warriors. For me, this is your upset of the playoffs, simply because Golden State, if they're hot and they shoot the basketball well, because the Clippers don't defend well, you've got a team that can shoot the frickin' lights out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Golden State's got this one just because I look at the Clippers as one of those teams where they're good for the season, but once a coach can match up with them, for a series, especially Golden State, where they do just shoot the ball so well. I think Golden State wins this one. I think it goes 6, but and
Absolutely.
it'll be exciting. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they just.
And then for me, the 4-5 matchup is slightly depressing. I mean, obviously you've got Portland's won 8 out of their last 10, so you have to give them some credit. But they started off the regular season for the first few months being one of the best team in the NBA record-wise.
Yeah, it was Rip City.
They teetered off for a little while, so it's really hard to get behind them. But the fact of the matter is they have won 8 out of 10 games to end the season. And they've done it in pretty quiet fashion without anyone giving them too much love. So you have to appreciate what they've been able to do. But at the same time, for a 4 seed and a 5 seed in the Western Conference, you're not going to find a more even matchup. I don't feel like to start off the series, simply because you look at why they excel. I mean, Portland rebounds well. They defend pretty well. They've got LaMarcus Aldridge. They've got a lot of talent. And Houston has this guy named James Harden. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No. Is he that? They've got this guy with a beard. Is it that guy?
Yeah, this guy. But
yeah.
But I mean, you've got a mixed bag of talent on one team, Rockets, versus a team that the Portland Trail Blazers, that have always been about simpler things and being, coherently or cohesively, better term there, cohesively better. I've got the Trailblazers on this one. In 6.
Yeah, I think they've been hot recently. That's what you really like to see, that going into the playoffs, no matter what league you're talking about. And Houston, like you said, you've got these guys, Harden and Lynn, and a team with players that can do stuff, but they don't seem quite cohesive. Like Portland has just seemed like when they were down, it was like the team was having, they were off a beat. They got that sort of fixed. I think it goes 6. Man, I'm torn here because I love James Harden. I think he's an interesting guy. I wish he was still up in Oklahoma City. We'd be talking about a crazy team right now. But I'm going to go with Portland, Rip City, in 6 games. Just teamwork, beating a couple dudes that know how to play ball really well. Gotcha. So what are your picks?
So I have a fun question for you, real quick. This is our quote unquote no cheating trivia question of the night. So don't cheat.
That's cool.
Out of the 16 teams that will make the playoffs this year, what is the one team out of those 16 that has a losing record in their last 10 games?
Ooh. I'm going to go with...
Obviously, I know the answer, so I'm not going to guess.
Yeah. Miami Heat.
That's a good guess. The Miami Heat are actually 5-5.
Okay, I knew they were right there.
They're 500, along with one other team, which is the Houston Rockets, but the only team with a losing record in their last 10 games is the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference.
Okay.
The Indiana Pacers, who are 4-6 in their last 10.
That's crazy. I'm not surprised that they've been down.
Go ahead and give me your team to come out of the East, Stoke.
East, Miami.
I hate it with a passion.
Right?
I hate it with a passion, but I agree.
Yeah, it's just...
Give me your Western Conference team.
Western Conference... Let's see. Man. The way it looks, it's just hard to think that San Antonio won't do it just because they have been good all year, and they've been especially great the last, I don't know, month, 2 months. So I gotta go San Antonio. Even though I want to lean Portland, I think it's San Antonio.
How many teams in the entire NBA have won more than 25 games on the road this year? How many teams have won more than 25 games on the road?
Two teams. I don't know.
More than 25 games on the road? The answer would be one, and that's the San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe another
Oklahoma City Thunder have won 25. The Miami Heat and the Toronto Raptors have both won 22. The Raptors have a chance to win 23 on the road and become the winningest road team in the East. But the fact of the matter is the San Antonio Spurs have won 30 games on the road. They can win outside of their comfort zone. They're going to be the Western Conference champions, and in my opinion, they will win the NBA Finals this year. I dislike the Spurs. I have always hated them since I was probably 3 or 4 years old, but it has grown at this point to a respected hatred to where I hate them, but I respect the fact that they are always amazing, and they know what the hell they're doing.
I think it's going to be an interesting finals to see. I wish, if they could have won against Miami in the past, that would have been awesome.
Yep.
And this one, the only thing I worry about is just playing, and I said this in a previous episode, just playing better, more talented teams, maybe wearing them down a bit, and possibly maybe the age thing, an injury popping up or something like that. So, I mean, I still, if Miami...
Right, that is a true factor.
If
They're
Miami...
going to play better teams.
If Miami plays 5-5 type of games and if they have to go long, I think San Antonio wins. But if Miami is able to pull it all together and win a series without dropping a game or only dropping one game, then I think Miami will have that energy to do it. But it's going to be close. I think it's going to be interesting NBA Finals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're right. There's a lot that can be said about that. And the fact that the Grizzlies are that 8 seed instead of the Suns, and again, I'm a Suns fan, so I'm a little bit biased, but at the same time, there's something to be said about that Suns-Spurs rivalry. The Suns would have, they have a few players left on this young team that understand that hatred for the Spurs. Memphis and San Antonio, obviously no one likes the Spurs, but the Suns hate the Spurs. So like you mentioned, there's a different level of skill and a different level of anticipation when you're playing an 8 seed that has won 48 games.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, well, so that was the playoffs first round look for the NHL and the NBA. And we'll be doing another episode later this week where we're going to cover Major League Baseball. So that should be pretty exciting as you get through that first 2 weeks. Everyone thinks their team's going to win the championship after that first week.
Unless you're in Arizona.
Yeah, unless you're Arizona.
In which case you are sucking a hard bottle of ooze.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to talk MLB here later on in the week, but just wanted to get, so many games in Major League Baseball, wading 20 games into it, just so you can get a feel of it finally. So it's been a lot of fun. We'll have some more beers and talk some more sports. I'll see you, bud.
Adios, amigos.